Okay, so the showdown the bait finesse world has been waiting for almost 2 years is finally here. And that is the cast battle between the 2020 Daiwa ALPHAS Air TW versus the 2016 Shimano ALDEBARAN BFS. Now, I guess the main question is, why am I doing this now, since the ALDEBARAN is pretty much effectively discontinued and the new replacement model will be coming out at the end of this month? And for that answer, I will let you guys know at the end of the video. Now, this is going to be a field cast battle only because things like ergonomics, weight, non-material, etc., that's pretty much personal preference. But using the measuring wheel to determine which reel to cast farther is not. Now, before we get into the casting footage, I just want to say this. When it comes to this lure right here, the 1 gram trout magnet, the clear winner is going to be your 2020 ALPHAS Air. Now, the ALDEBARAN can actually cast this better than you'd expect, and as far as distance goes with this trout magnet, they're actually very comparable, but when it comes to castability, ease of casting, and accuracy, the ALPHAS is a clear head and shoulders above the ALDEBARAN casting this tiny 1 gram lure. But the question is, what about normal BFS lures? And I'm talking about lures that the majority of bait finesse anglers fish with. That's going to be 1/16 of an ounce all the way up to about 3/16 of an ounce. Because let's be honest, I think I'm probably the only guy that regularly fishes the trout magnet with a bait caster. So that's what we're going to find out today. I just want to say that this battle took 2 weekends, so there's actually going to be multiple rounds, and it took 2 weekends due to break-offs, but I'll explain more about that later. But the original plan was to cast 3 lures, a lure that weighed 1/16 of an ounce, a lure that weighed 1/8 of an ounce, and a lure that weighed about 3/16 of an ounce. And I was going to bring an extra third mystery reel into the equation, just to spice things up. Now, before I show you guys the casting footage, let me show you the rod and line that I used. Now, the rod I used was my typical Major Craft Corza 6'5" ultralight, and it's got a lure rating of 1/32 of an ounce to 1/4 of an ounce, and a line rating of 3 to 10 pounds, and this is a BFS bass rod. Now, for the line, I switched things up, and instead of using my normal 4-pound bulk monofilament, here's a surprise for all you braid guys, because the line that you see on these reels is not mono, it's actually this right here, Hercules 6-pound braid. And I guess in Japanese speak is at 0.2 gauge. But yeah, this is the line that I used just to spice things up. And let's get to the first round. Okay, so let's go over the specifics of that round real quick before I show you the results. Now the lure that I chose was this right here. This is a sinking little jerkbait minnow that I got from AliExpress. It weighs slightly under 1/8 of an ounce, and I guess since it's a sinking minnow, there's some weights inside because this little jerkbait casts like a bullet. I was actually really surprised at the distances I was getting with this particular lure. Now the brake settings for this round were ALPHAS air, spool tension, left alone from the factory. There is just a hair of side-to-side play, which is perfect. Brake setting was between 7 and 6, and more on that later. Now with the ALDEBARAN, spool tension set to just minimize side-to-side play, backed off just a hair. External brake dial was set to about 3.1. So with that being said, let me put the results up on the screen for you. And the ALDEBARAN took a clear and dominant win with an average of 109.52 feet, and the ALPHAS averaged 96.25 feet. So impressive numbers for both reels, but the clear and easy winner was the ALDEBARAN, beating the ALPHAS by over 13-foot average. Now let's talk about the ALPHAS for a second. Now the first two casts were made with the brake setting set on 7, and they were 92 feet for the first one and then 94 feet 10 inches for the second cast. And then I decided that I would try to lower the brake 1 click to 6. Now in practice that was giving me mixed results, but luckily for the ALPHAS I was able to get a clean cast of 101 feet 11 inches. So I figured I'd try to make 2 more casts and see what happens, but unfortunately the braid dug in and snapped the lure off, and it flew off out in the field and I couldn't find it. So that meant that the third mystery reel could not cast this lure, unfortunately. So with that being said, let's get to the second lure. Okay, so this is the lure that I use for that particular round. This is a little micro crankbait that with the snap swivel I was using is slightly under 2 grams, probably about 1.8 or 1.9 grams. According to my notes, the ALPHAS brake setting was exactly the same, while with the ALDEBARAN I actually had to crank it up to number 4. And let me go ahead and flash these results for you guys. Now surprisingly, the ALDEBARAN takes yet another win with an average of 72.63 feet, while the ALPHAS average 68.86 feet. Now more on this. Now remember when I said that the ALPHAS broke this lure off due to braid dig-in? Well, that blow up was so bad I actually had to cut out a lot of line in order to proceed. So the ALPHAS was running a little bit low on line for this particular 1/16 ounce test. But don't worry, I ran the test over the next weekend with the full amount of line. Now the plan was to do the 3/16 ounce lure next, but unfortunately when test casting, I believe the ALDEBARAN, that lure broke off and it was the only 3/16 ounce lure that I brought with me. So that's surprise number one. 6-pound braid broke off on a 1/8 ounce lure and a 3/16 ounce lure. I would have never had that problem using mono. Okay, so not being satisfied with those results, as well as, the breakoffs and not being able to test the mystery reel, I decided I would do it again the next weekend. And let me show you the results for round one. Okay, so the lure that I used for that particular battle was this right here. It's like a Rapala deep diving little mini crank. And as far as brakes go, with the ALDEBARAN, I was able to go to about 3.2 on the external dial. With the Alphas, I kept it on mag 7 because 6 was just too inconsistent. I didn't want to risk breaking this lure off. Alright, so let's do this. Now you saw only 3 casts in that cast footage, and that's because on the 4th cast with the ALDEBARAN, the braid dug in and snapped the lure off, and I couldn't find it. If you're wondering why I said I couldn't find it but yet I'm holding it in my hand, that's because I actually brought 2 of these out, and unfortunately, due to poor quality control, one of these lures was almost half a gram heavier than the other, even though they're supposed to be the exact same lure. So not wanting to taint the results, I just moved on to the next round, but here are the results with the 3 best casts from the Alphas. And you'll see that the ALDEBARAN once again took a clear victory of 104.08 feet, while the Alphas average 99.89 feet. Now, I was actually able to do 6 casts for the Alphas, and if I totaled up all 6 casts, the total average drops down to 96.96 feet. So take it how you will, the ALDEBARAN still takes a clear victory, though not as dominant as the first lure, because apparently this little crankbait doesn't fly through the air that well because I guess it's so bulbous and it's hollow. But we're still talking well over 30 yards for both reels. Okay, so remember how I said that the Alphas would get a redo on the 1/16 ounce little minnow with full line? Well, I retested it and it did marginally better this time around with an average of 69.27 feet. So it gained about a little less than half a foot with full line, but still below the ALDEBARAN. Now here's a funny thing. I believe on the third cast with the ALDEBARAN, when I walked out to the lure, not even a foot away was this lure that I broke off the previous weekend. And that's how I have it in my hand right now. So, having found the original 1/8 ounce lure, I decided to go ahead and test the mystery reel to see if it could beat out the ALDEBARAN. So it's obvious the clear winner here is the 2016 Shimano ALDEBARAN BFS. And I attribute this win down to two things. First thing is that Daiwa's air brake is way too restrictive. It kind of cancels out any kind of weight loss Daiwa did to the spool. And the second thing is that going down to 28 millimeters for the Alpha spool was just way too much. We're talking a 4 millimeter difference in spool size. And even though the Alpha spool is about a gram lighter than the ALDEBARAN's brakes are superior in the fact that it gives you the best mix of over and control without choking off the distance. So is there a Daiwa reel out there that can contend with this mighty ALDEBARAN BFS? A reel that has less restrictive brakes. Now I happen to have such a reel, and it is the third mystery reel that I brought out, and that of course is going to be the GARCIA Air TWPE Special. Now when filled with line, it's actually got a significantly lighter spool than the Alphas, but it's got a braid tuned rotor that doesn't pop out quite as far as the Alphas. And I'm gonna just make this short and simple. It did not beat the ALDEBARAN. In fact, the GARCIA versus the Alphas is gonna be an entirely separate video. Okay, so question time. Now the first question is, who is surprised, or maybe even shocked, or maybe even angry, or maybe even butt triggered by these results? Especially given all the hype that the ALPHAS Air has been given ever since it came out. Now the second question is, who actually owns both of these reels? And the keyword being owns, so that's going to disqualify pretty much all of the online shills and fanboys, and you're not surprised by these results at all. Now as far as the first question, let's be honest, all the hype around the ALPHAS Air TW was really caused by my video where I showed how easy it could cast a 1 gram trout magnet straight out of the box with no modifications. Now while that is an impressive feat, I've never uploaded any other video of the ALPHAS Air throwing regular BFS lures. So you're welcome, Daiwa Japan. Now to answer the second question, these results don't surprise me at all, and let me show you why. Now prior to this cast battle, it's kind of funny, but I've never actually casted the ALPHAS Air and the ALDEBARAN BFS side by side. But let me tell you why these results don't surprise me. Now the very first weekend after I got my ALPHAS Air, I took it out to a pond to do a cast comparison against these reels right here. The first one being the SS Air, which is the reel that I believe the ALPHAS Air was replacing. And the second one being this budget poor man's homemade T3 Air that I put together using a T3 ballistic and a bunch of AliExpress parts. Now, I casted several different lures of several different BFS weights, going from over 1/8 of an ounce down to 1/16 of an ounce. And the best caster out of all these three was the homemade T3 Air, where it outdistanced the other two by about 2 to 3 feet on every lure. So we're going to remove this reel out of the picture, and let's talk about these two reels. Now when it came down to side-by-side casting between the SS Air and the ALPHAS Air TW, I found no difference between them. Maybe the ALPHAS cast maybe a foot further on some casts, but overall they were literally the same in distance, and I will give the slight edge to the ALPHAS in ease of casting of a 1/16 ounce lure, but it wasn't drastic. It's nothing that a simple adjustment in your cast stroke wouldn't cure in the SS Air. Now I'm going to put a graphic up on the screen for you, and this is a three-way cast battle I did about 2 or 3 years ago with the SSR, the REVO LTX BF8, and the ALDEBARAN BFS, casting a 1/8 ounce lure and a 1/16 ounce lure using 4-pound mono. And you can see with the light 1/16 ounce lure, all three were very close, but when you bumped it up to the 1/8 ounce lure, the REVO and the ALDEBARAN just walked away from the SSR. So basically, after casting these two reels side by side with each other, I pretty much knew that the ALDEBARAN would be better for regular BFS weights. So I suppose the next big question is, why did I wait so long to do this cast battle and show this to everybody? Well, let me put it to you like this. Now, first of all, you're welcome, Daiwa, Japan. And second of all, I kind of wanted Shimano to bring out a reel, not to necessarily beat the ALPHAS Air, but to bring out a reel that can cast a 1 gram lure comfortably. Now, the ALDEBARAN can cast a 1 gram lure out of the box, but you can't do it comfortably. You have to get an aftermarket spool to be able to cast it as easy as the ALPHAS Air. But here's the problem. Shimano is not known to be a company that participates in, I guess, frivolous spec wars. And what I mean by that is they were never interested in joining the race to have the fastest gear ratio reel like GARCIA and Daiwa and KASTKING. And they were never a company to give their reels huge drag pressure numbers just for bragging rights. So while I knew that a brand new ALDEBARAN was due to be released sometime soon, in my mind there was a chance that Shimano didn't even care about designing a reel to cast down to 1 gram easily. Because just as I said before many times, it looks like I'm the only one that I know of fishing a trout magnet regularly with a bait caster. But it looked like my plan worked, because as the information from the Shimano Pro Staffer reveals, the Daiwa STEEZ Air was the target for the new ALDEBARAN BFS. Now the big question is this: given the fact that the super small 28mm spool hinders the ALPHAS Air, and more than likely the STEEZ Air when it comes to casting regular bait finesse lures, will the 29mm spool of the new ALDEBARAN suffer the same fate? And on that note, we're going to end this video out by me showing you guys more pictures of the new reel, as well as show you what Shimano's done with their braking system, hopefully to mitigate the distance loss that can occur by going down to a much smaller spool. So let's check that out. Okay, so here we are on one of Shimano's Pro Staffer's websites, and let me show you what I found out. First of all, we're going to get much better pictures of the new reel, if my slow internet will load it. And here's a nice picture of the reel. You can definitely see that it's got that, I guess, cobalt bluish color. And here's another view of that frankly ugly side plate, and it looks like they are keeping this very cheap looking fully exposed black dial. Now, one thing they could have done was they could have chrome plated it to make it look a little bit more high end, but maybe the aftermarket will produce one for us. Alright, now here's a picture of the old and the new reel. Now at this angle, it looks like the old reel is shorter but wider. Right, now here's the old spool and the new spool. You can definitely see the size difference. Now, one thing I did notice with the new spool, I don't know if it's going to be on this website, was that it doesn't look like they went with that tiny micro bearing right there. Now you can see that there is this gold ring around the center, which is more than likely the same raised support ribbing used to reinforce the spool internally, just like the old spool. But here's a nice view of the side plate, and it looks like the new reel is definitely going to sit lower on the reel seat versus the old reel. And the side plate of the new reel looks significantly smaller. So let's just hope that the teeth on this brake dial don't dig into my fingers. Okay, so here's the information about the new braking system. Now, according to this is the brakes of the 2016 model at the minimum setting. So you can see there's a lot of magnet still visible in order to provide braking force. Now, this is the new reel with the brakes set to minimum, and you can see here that you can't see any magnets. And once again, there's this metal ring that they've used, and I'm sure that's there for a reason. But here are the old brakes and the new brakes at their maximum position, meaning they're popped out in their furthest position for maximum braking. And here are some more daylight shots of the new reel. You can definitely tell it's blue. And from this angle, the new reel definitely looks smaller. It's another nice shot. So the new reel actually looks great if you're looking at it from the handle side plate. Okay, so according to Shimano, that was one of the big changes for the new braking system, was that you could literally go down to 0 magnetic force. But as I said in the previous preview video of this reel, I can't even go to 0 on the current reel. So how is going down to 0 brake on the new reel even going to be castable? So maybe that's why they put this metal ring here. But once again, we're not going to know until I get my hands on one and show you guys what it can do. Alright guys, so that's it for the ALDEBARAN versus ALPHAS Air TW battle. Looks like my plan worked, and Shimano has come out with a reel that will comfortably cast my 1 gram trout magnets. But hopefully it will also be at least as good as the old model when casting regular weight BFS lures. So the 2016 ALDEBARAN BFS goes out on top. Alright guys, thanks a lot.